everybody. Welcome back to OtakO'clock. It's me, Brennan, and Sam. He's here this week.
Yeah.
Virginia isn't, so we're having a different two-person experience this time around.
It's OtakO'clock.
Oh,
we only talk about bro anime for men.
That was bad.
That means it's Isekai, the ultimate male fulfillment fantasy.
That's time. Yep. We're talking about Isekai this week, which currently is in the bad power fantasy stage of its development. But we're going to talk about how that's not the only thing Isekai is and how Isekai got to that state.
Before we talk about it, we should mention, if you don't know anime terminology or if you're new to anime, an isekai specifically is an anime that takes a character out of a familiar situation, like their normal life in Japan or America, and throws them into a bizarre supernatural world that more fits them than their real life.
Yeah, so the translation literally means another world.
Yep.
And that's the overriding narrative trope of Isekai is that the character is in a place that is not the world in which he came. Now, this is different from the hero's journey, which is the other very common thing where a hero is put into a world from which he did not come, because in the hero's journey, a hero goes from a place that he found familiar and comforting, usually maybe with a family or a job or things like that,
any place where the status quo was maintained.
And the character liked the status quo, or was at least content.
Yeah,
with the status
it
quo.
It is a life without direct conflict.
Yeah, and then they go to a world which is strange and which they do not fit in, and they have to change and adapt and grow in order to fit in by the end of the story.
It's specifically introducing a challenge that forces them to leave their comfort zone, to experience something that will improve them or change them, then go back to their comfort zone changed, able to confront the problem. That's the idea. There's many different versions of it, but that's the most common narrative trope or style that you see in almost all Western fiction. We bring this up because isekais are the opposite of hero's journey in many cases. This isn't always true because isekai still can fit within the framework, but
it is just like hero's journey. Isekai is a very broad framework.
Yeah,
there's a lot of possibilities within it, but generally, at least especially today, isekais refer to taking a character who does not feel like he fits in with the world in which he came from and takes them to a place in which they are more at home. Whether or not the character has struggles or not is kind of the defining characteristic of what at least me and Sam have in our opinions between good and bad isekai.
Right.
But regardless of whether or not the character struggles, that world better fits them, and those struggles are things that the character feels are like the kind of struggles that the character wants rather than the kind of struggles that the character had to deal with before.
To explain it in more simplistic terms and with a lot less jargon, I suppose.
Yeah, we just dumped a lot of high school and college
vocabulary words.
So apologies.
But to put it simply, a hero's journey could be classified as The Hobbit. It's probably the best example of a hero's journey, the most well-known in Western media, outside of like the classic stuff like Beowulf. But in The Hobbit, Bilbo is in a place of comfort. He's in the Shire, smoking grass and drinking and having the ladies all day. And then Gandalf comes in like, "Yo, son, your life is a lie. Come out and do this crazy shit." And Bilbo goes, "Yeah, all right, why not? I want to get rich." Or if he was actually, he had issue with the mundanity of his life. But the reason why isn't important. Then he goes to a place of extreme discomfort, the wilderness, caves, like fighting battles, things that he is not accustomed to, grows and adapts to these, and then comes back to the Shire a better and stronger man. But in an isekai, imagine if when he went with Gandalf, he realized that he loved the life on the road and realized that his old life was not to his liking. Instead of complaining and whining the whole time like Bilbo does, he's like, "Ah, man, troll shit, this is amazing." It's pretty much that's the best way you can see it.
That's a pretty good way to describe it. And so isekai is a really common thing in Japan, not so much in the Western conception of things. I would be hard-pressed to give you Western examples of isekai as opposed to Japanese examples, because the Japanese examples are much more prolific and much more well-remembered.
Well, if you want to look at, there's a lot of reasons why this is, and it's hard to go into it because that would be an hour-long video.
It's a literary history thing. It has to do with different cultures.
Just to put it simply, is that isekai is in the type of escape narrative wherein the hero's journey is a power fantasy. So in the hero's journey, it's all about overcoming obstacles and becoming stronger and dominating the opposition. Whereas in an isekai, it's not as much about dominating.
It's about getting away from the things that you hated.
Exactly. And, this can apply to the hero's journey too, but it's really a secondary aspect, where in an isekai, it is the primary driving force. And the best example, I think what you mentioned earlier was Alice in Wonderland. Is probably the closest example to a common Western isekai that you could think of. Because, in a way, the Wonderland does benefit Alice in a lot of ways.
Yeah, she doesn't really fit in her old life. She's
Absolutely
just kind of alone. But she doesn't exactly fit in the Wonderland either.
It's a good middle ground. If you want to think of it like a sliding scale, you have the hero's journey with Star Wars and The Hobbit, Alice in Wonderland, and then like Sword Art Online or .hack or something. So you have that sliding scale.
Speaking of, let's talk about some popular isekais so that you guys might have a little bit more grounding in the kind of thing we're talking about. So, we're talking about things like Sword Art Online,
Yep.
No Game, No Life, the things which have been everywhere in the past 5 years. Especially the past 5 years. They've just been
They have exploded
everywhere.
in popularity, and I have some reasons, some theories as to why that is, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, and so they're very common. You're not going to be able to find an anime season nowadays without at least 2 of them, I would say.
Bare minimum, they're almost becoming as prolific as school animes.
Yeah, I mean, usually you end up with school
Isekais.
character. Yes, school isekais, because Japan loves nothing if not tropes.
Oh man, Rosario Vampire is actually technically an isekai if you
Yes.
think about it.
Yes, it is.
Kill me.
And honestly, I would argue the manga version of that is actually not the worst isekai.
No,
the anime now.
The anime is just breast.
Yes.
The manga.
And
that's
for
some-
and for every anime isekai, there is at least 5 manga isekais,
Yeah.
and for every one of those, there's at least 5 light novel isekais, and they go down in quality each time.
So yeah.
So if you think anime isekais are bad, just go read some light novel isekais.
Oh, you think
they're really bad.
you think season 2 of SAO is trash? Oh, young one, you don't even know.
Yeah.
It gets really
I've
bad.
seen some real doozies, including one that revolved around the entire economy and power structure of the world revolved around getting slaves. So that was not a great one.
Actually, I could actually see a really good isekai about that if you did
All
it
the
right.
slaves were women.
Okay.
So yeah.
Oh man, that's
Yeah. So there's a lot of them, and a lot of them are bad.
Yeah,
and we're
no.
going to discuss why.
Well, let's first talk about maybe the most popular ones.
Yes.
So the most popular one, at least in modern history, one of the modern anime staples, probably of our generation, is probably SAO. Probably because there was such controversy and such a dichotomy between the seasons. SAO is about a guy named Kirito that's like a miserable loser in real life. Shocker. And then when he goes to a video game world and everyone gets trapped, and if they leave, they die, but he's badass.
He's now the guy to be around.
Yeah, he's the dude that kills the things. Literally the best way you could describe him. And it's basically a bad video game isekai harem. At least it becomes that eventually.
Yeah, it gets worse.
It gets worse. Season 2 is actually somewhat interesting. I personally find it to be somewhat overwhelming. But it gets pretty cringy after season 1. Then we have the grandpa of Sword Art Online .hack that was popular in the 90s
I mean, and then
and the early
you have
2000s.
Horizon.
Yeah.
To an extent.
Those were the grandpa of the video game isekai. Oh no, I know one that we could relate. Code Lyoko. That's in English.
Oh man, yeah, that is an
That's
English isekai.
Actually French, I believe. French.
No, it was animated in France.
Yeah.
You are correct.
It was French. There was also the original dubbing was in
forehead
French.
bros.
Yeah. So that's probably the closest thing to an American isekai is Code Lyoko. It's really good. Look it up. It gets worse later on, but it's still a good show. And then what's some of the more unpopular isekai that's floating around?
Unpopular Dude, there are
Hundreds of
so
thousands.
many. Let's see. How many? Oh, dude, I am drawing a blank because there are so many. I don't even know which ones would be good examples.
Give me the shittiest 5 isekai that you.
Well, there was the slave one. There was the one about a kid who could accidentally destroy the world, and he kept doing that and going to other worlds and
The
destroying
Melancholy
them.
of Heart, Suzumiya?
No, not that one.
Best isekai.
There was, as far as worst, there's so many. There was the one where the guy turned into a shape-shifting slime with the ability to eat everyone's powers and got all the powers.
Does the
as a
slime
result.
also dissolve women's clothing too? Does
No,
that happen?
No,
I'm shocked.
luckily.
I'm shocked.
Luckily.
Genuinely
But
shocked.
that's the kind of thing where there are bad isekais. And there's a billion of them where the protagonist dies, wakes up in another body, and decides that he's going to use... I have one. an amazing gun nerd and loser in Japan who doesn't have any guns because it's Japan, dies and wakes up in a new world and decides to build guns because modern technology wank. Woo.
Yeah. So that makes sense. You can also see High School of the Dead almost as an isekai.
Yeah, a little bit.
Just for the one fat kid with the gun fetish. Because for him, he genuinely admitted multiple times that the zombie world fitted him more effectively than the real world. Because in the real world, he was a fat loser. But now that there's a consistent violent threat, his abnormal obsession with firearms and ability
now
to kill.
reasonable rather than really weird.
Exactly. And that sort of segues us into maybe what we define as good and bad isekais.
Because don't get us wrong, there are good isekais.
Yeah, it's not a genre that's inherently bad. But it is a genre that is extremely exploitable considering Japanese cultural climate.
It's formulaic. It can be formulaic, and Japan loves formulaic products.
It really does, because they have a huge consumer market that benefits having massive amounts of
It's practically industrially produced.
Practically it is.
Yeah, no, the artist, the same author that puts out one of these things will put out another one 12 months later and another one after that. And
it
so
literally,
on and so forth.
it literally could be defined as a cookie cutter style.
Yeah.
You literally have X, Y, and Z characters vomit in. It's basically it's the Japanese version of the American sitcom.
Harlequin romances.
Exactly. You know those god awful books that you see on the way to checkouts at grocery stores. It's paperbacks.
They are all paperbacks with a shirtless man on the cover. All of them. It's the same shirtless man on all the covers.
Yeah, it is. But my God, is he gorgeous.
He must make a lot of money.
Oh my God, yeah, dude. Anyway, but the reason why isekais are so frequently bad is we mentioned earlier that they're what's called escapist fantasies. Now, that's a type of narrative in which the reader is able to project themselves onto the protagonist.
And in which you want to do that because the protagonist is having a great time rather than a really awful time full of challenges.
Right, and it really, there's a lot of cultural issues in Japan right now with people having unfulfilled home lives and unfulfilled jobs.
Yeah, Japan is undergoing a crisis at the moment. Not an economic crisis, though it's not been doing so great economically, but a cultural crisis where there have been 2 straight generations of people who have had very unfulfilling lives from the moment they left high school, which we talked about in our school anime.
We did.
Why high school is such a big deal, because that was the last time people
fun,
for
really.
30 years of Japanese culture have had fun and had friends and had time to do the things they wanted to do. And so isekai is a way for people who feel like they are nothing but corporate drones, unable to even find the time to find somebody to love.
Or people that are considered isolated and outcast from society, like what are they
Because
called?
they don't want to be
Neats.
corporate drones, yes.
Yeah, needs. Or people in neat cultures that feel like they're isolated and separate from society. Old-fashioned nerd or geek culture in America. In America, nerd and geek culture has somewhat been acclaimed and popularized.
Yeah, back in the 80s, being a nerd was
oh shit, dude!
not
Even in the
comfortable.
2000s, in the early 2000s, being a nerd, you still get your ass kicked.
Yeah.
It's sort of like that, and it's an escapist fantasy for the perceived people of that style. And we're
And-
not throwing shade at Japan. This isn't anything talking shit about Japanese culture, people. This is just a very real issue that's understood
And it's
there
part of
and
why
here.
it is becoming so embraced here in the U.S. because we've been seeing a lot of those cultural issues pop up here as well from similar problems that the Japanese society just happened to have slightly earlier than we did. And so that's why they can be so bad and yet still be so popular.
Yeah, exactly.
But-
and it's a type of fantasy that very much fits the Japanese climate at the time, and that's why we think it's possibly so popular, because isekais have been exponentially growing over the past few years.
Luckily, along with that growth of bad things, there have been a
some
couple
good
gems, and
ones.
we're going to finish off on a good note by giving you guys some ones that are good.
How about you tell me your favorite?
All right, Konosuba, hands down, Konosuba, give me it. And Konosuba is, in my opinion, the best comedic anime to have come out in the past 2 years. Some
the
people,
one where the guy
some
keeps
people
dying?
will fight me over Sakamoto Desuka.
Okay.
Whether that one's funnier than Konosuba, but it is definitely top 2, even if you like Sakamoto a lot.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because this is an isekai. Only the main character loves the world he's in. Only he has not been given the usual powers that that typical isekai characters have been given to make it easy. So even though he loves the world, it's really awful to him.
Let's put it like this. He's been thrown into a D&D campaign with a poorly spec'd bard. That's pretty much what it is.
And everyone around him is stupid. And it's comedic. It's played for
Oh,
laughs.
so he
it's
isn't
the
an
best
average
thing in
D&D
the world.
game.
Yes, he is.
And
Everybody's stupid and slightly nuts.
my probably one of my favorite, because again, I'm with like the older generation of stuff. I really like .hack. Because I think .hack is genuinely like an interesting story. It goes into the world that they're in. It does a lot of strong building, and the characters are decent. And if you want to really look at a grandpa isekai and look at one of the animes that really almost set the foundation for the genre, it is probably .hack.
Oh
and
yeah,
Log
no, for
Horizon.
sure.
And they're both good. .hack is a little bit dated nowadays, but it's a 90s anime, early 2000s anime. What do you expect?
It's how they work. Yeah.
It was, but it was still good. It was still exceptionally good. And I don't know if it's necessarily good by today's standards, because again, it has aged. But I would still check it out if you're interested in it, especially if you like anime history and seeing genre development.
Yeah, so there's our 2 recommendations, and since we're running low on time here because we've gone on so much, we're gonna have to end it there. See you guys next week. Thanks for watching.
Peace.